Hey everyone, welcome back to Upright Christian Parenting. I'm your host Hannah Peru. Today I have an incredible guest. I'm just so excited to have him. Michael Farris is currently serving as general counsel for the National Religious Broadcasters, where he focuses on legal issues around religious freedom and free speech. He's also leading an online civics education course on American government and citizenship. Additionally, he remains active with the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which he started, advocating for homeschool rights, and he is actively speaking on educational freedom and parental rights. Oh my goodness, welcome to the Treehouse today, Michael Farris.
Thank you, Hannah. It's an honor to be with you today.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am just so excited. I feel like you are a pioneer for us homeschool parents, for those listening that do homeschool. You are a pioneer. You have paved the way for so many of us. I would love to time travel with you for just a minute if we could, and go back to 1980s and pretend I'm not in diapers still,
Okay.
and go back there and just give us a framework. What did that look like for the homeschool world and the homeschool community? Because it's clearly different than today, but fill us in. What did that look like for you?
Well, first of all, Hannah, I'm surprised you were even born in the early 1980s.
Don't look
Anyhow,
too closely at the grays. They're hiding. They're hiding.
well, in the way I like to summarize it, when I started HSLDA in 1983, if you asked all 50 state attorney generals, is it legal to homeschool? All 50 would have said no. Now, three or four of them would have been wrong as a matter of statutory law, and I thought they were all wrong as a matter of constitutional law. But that was the attitude. That was the kind of the official take, if you will, from the establishment. And today, if you ask all 50, is it legal to homeschool? All 50 will say, yes, it's legal, some of them reluctantly, and several will add, but we're about to do something about that. So we're actually entering into a season that's going to be more like the 1980s for some states than it is been for a long time. It's been there's still been legal issues regularly. I mean, Pennsylvania appellate court just issued a decision within the last several days overturning a very bad decision in Pennsylvania. So even though the law in Pennsylvania that I helped shepherd through the legislature, many years ago now, it's been clear, but still there have been cases. But the fundamental right to homeschool has been settled since about around 2005, or more or less. And so it took about 25 years for it to be settled all 50 states. But people were hiding. People would keep their shades drawn. They would make up names for their schools. We called our homeschool Samuel Adams Christian School, but we didn't hide. I mean, the way we hid was the first year of homeschooling, we lived in Washington State and it was illegal to homeschool. We hid by being on the front page of the Seattle Times above the fold on a Sunday. So that was the way we hid. And so, then again, I could defend our family, and they tended to not attack people that had the capacity to defend themselves. In any event, it was a very, very different world. You meet people on the street, they never heard of homeschooling, they presumed it was illegal, they presumed you were doing bad things for your kids. And most of that's gone away, not completely, but most of the people in society now know homeschool families and they think well of them. And so, as a general rule, there are exceptions here and there, obviously, but general reputation of homeschoolers is good and it's come a long way. But we're entering into a new era that's not so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I have multiple questions. One, I want to touch on, you mentioned some states. What states stand out to you as being the most in danger? And I would put money that Colorado is near the top of that list.
Well, I don't know of specific legislative activity in
Okay.
Colorado yet, but philosophically, Colorado is positioned to be in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
Uh, Virginia is in a very bad spot where I live. New Jersey was going to be in a very bad spot, but it looks like the really bad legislation has been pulled back thanks to the activism of homeschoolers in New Jersey. That's within the last several days, actually.
That's great. That's great.
Illinois is poised to do some really bad things, but it should not be partisan. Homeschooling, the homeschool families in America are genuinely bipartisan, nonpartisan, pretty broad spectrum. Yes, it's dominantly evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics in the homeschool, but that's always been the case, at least since the mid 80s. There are tens of thousands of families that are left of center that are homeschooling, and so it shouldn't be a partisan issue. But the frank truth is, if you're in a state controlled by Democrat legislatures, you're likely to be in trouble because the Democrat Party is controlled in part. Part of their key coalition that they're loyal to is the teachers union. And so the teachers union hates homeschooling, has always hated homeschooling. And then they have philosophical alliances with, other people in that movement. And they don't like the fact that we teach our kids to love God. And they want to control the philosophy of every child in America. So it boils down to that. And there are some in that movement that are openly saying those things. Like there's law professors that I can name that have written articles saying exactly what I've just said. Martha Albert Finneman at Emory, Kimberly Urraco at Northwestern University, Catherine Rosh at George Washington, and so on. Elizabeth Bartlett at Harvard, famously, even though Harvard can't spell arithmetic on the front cover of their magazine, but nonetheless, they tell us that they're really smart there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if that's what they believe, then we can give it to them.
Pat them on the head and say, "Bless your heart."
They come from good people. That's what my relatives say in the South. Oh, bless their heart, those sweet things. Oh my goodness. Wow. So what were the reasons for you? You have a big family. You told me before the call how many kids you have and how many grandkids. I'd love for my listeners to hear that from you and to kind of hear what were the reasons why your family chose homeschool path, and was it similar to reasons why, someone like myself would choose it today? Or, what was going on there that was the decision that you guys made for your family?
Sure. Well, we have 10 children, and they're obviously all grown now. Our youngest just finished school in December. He got his PhD in nuclear physics from Michigan State University. And so he was number 10. But
sounds like homeschool did well for him.
This homeschool kids just can't. His older brother, number 9, is a geneticist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Got a PhD from Notre Dame in genetics.
Okay. I won't hold the Notre Dame thing against him.
Yeah, well,
grad over here.
But anyhow, we homeschooled our kids for 33 years, and we have 31 grandkids, all of whom are being or have been homeschooled. The reason we started homeschooling is we had our oldest daughter was the only one of school age at the time, and she was in first grade when we first found out about homeschooling. And I was raised in the home of a public school principal. My dad was an elementary principal, and my wife got a teaching degree in elementary education, planning to be a public school teacher. But by the time we got through law school and she got through her education degree, it was pretty obvious to us that it was incompatible with our Christian faith to have our kids in a public school. Mm-hmm. So we had our daughter in a Christian school in when she was there in the first grade, but we ran into a guy named Raymond Moore, and I met him in person, and Vicki heard him on Focus on the Family, and his basic pitch was kids get their values from whoever they spend the majority of their time with.
That's right.
If they spend a majority of time with their peers, they get their values from their peers. They spend a majority of their time with their family. They get their values from their family. And we saw that happening in our daughter at 6 years old in a Christian school. And even though it was a Christian school and we thought well of the school, and I still think well of Christian education, those little 6-year-olds she was hanging out with weren't the people we wanted her to get her values from, because frankly, Vicki and I were smarter than 6-year-olds and had more Christian wisdom and a little more maturity in the Lord and so on. And so we wanted to transmit our Christian values to our kids. And we simply did not know whether it would work in education. I'll give you one of the hints of the early homeschooling movement. Early homeschoolers always like to talk about the founding fathers being homeschooled, and really few other examples. The reason we did that is those are the only examples we knew about. We didn't know if it would work academically. Now it turns out it's better academically than any other option as a group. Now, you can take individuals to individuals. You can always get exceptions to this, but the group of homeschoolers compared to the group of public schoolers compared to the group of private schoolers, homeschoolers always come out on top on those kind of comparisons. And it's pretty simple why. It's not that homeschool parents are smarter or better looking or have fewer cavities than other teachers. It's just one-on-one instruction's more efficient than 1-on-30 or 1-on-25 instruction.
Yeah.
It just works better. Private lessons for tennis work better than group lessons for tennis. Mm-hmm. And that's true in most things, especially learning the basics of life, learning how to read, learning how to write, learning the basics of mathematics. That simply is the case. We didn't know it was going to be great academically, but it was. So
that's great. That's great. So what do you feel like is the biggest threat today? I mean, if you're raising your kids today, what red flags? I mean, what would be the number one reason you're such a big advocate for homeschool? What is that? This is the reason, guys. What would you tell parents today?
I was litigating cases against public schools in the 70s and 80s. And in those days, the public schools, I wouldn't send my kids to the schools because they were subtly anti-Christian. Mm-hmm. And they taught what I called in those days the great religion of hodgepodge, which basically said there is no right way. Any way is right. And that, of course, is a lie, and it's confusing for kids, and it leads to spiritual confusion. And, in a biblical sense, it says in Romans 1, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, God turned them over to a depraved mind to do that which ought not to be done. And then there's a laundry list of sins, including hating God, being insolent and disobedient to parents, all kinds of things. That's the consequence of ignoring God. But today, that the great religion of hodgepodge has been replaced by a pretty specific woke theology. And it is not anti-Christian in the subtle sense that it used to be in the days when we had young kids. It is aggressively anti-Christian today. I filed an amicus brief in the Supreme Court this last year in a case out of Maryland where the Supreme Court upheld parental rights for the first time in decades, the Mahmoud case. And the instructions given by the school district to the teachers was to disrupt the religious beliefs of the children that they're bringing from their families by, they gave them a specific point counterpoint when the kids would say, we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. These are like 7-year-olds they're aiming this at.
Right.
The teachers are instructed on how to counter argue against a 7-year-old. It was specific. It was clear indoctrination going on there in the Montgomery County, Maryland schools. And I want to tell you, the number of schools in the country that don't do that are the rare exceptions. The vast majority of the public schools in this country do that. The ones that, there may be a few isolated places and outlying areas where there's a pretty dominant local Christian culture that are back to the great religion of hodgepodge. back to the kind of the mess of the 70s and 80s and 90s. But the vast majority of schools of curriculum, even though there's, I go to a really large church. There are hundreds of public school teachers in my church. There's about 10,000 people on a Sunday morning. And they're good, godly people, but they're being silenced, fired.
Yeah.
It, so, God bless those teachers. They're trying to do good things in a very dark environment. But the administration, the philosophy coming down from the Department of Education at the state level and from the local school district is just, it is aggressively anti-Christian, anti-American. I mean, ask yourself, why do 62% of the 18 to 29-year-olds in this country have a favorable view of socialism, and in the low 30% have a favorable view of communism? That's because they've been taught in the public schools
Yeah.
to favor socialism and communism,
Yeah.
and it's stuck. So we're living in a very aggressive time. The idea that this is a culture war is, it cannot be stated more literally. That is a literal truth. These people are at war with the philosophy that you and I hold.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So what, how is your role today? I mean, what specific things are you doing right now that you feel like are hot on the table, that, we really need to be more aware of?
Well, I have always worn at least one hat at HSLDA. I've been the chairman of the board of Homeschool Legal Defense since March of 1983 when I founded it. So I'm still
Incredible.
the chairman of HSLDA. And in fact, I will, as soon as this podcast is over, I'm going to be having one of my regular meetings with the president of HSLDA. So what HSLDA is doing is direct action, fighting the fight against these state legislative battles, and I'm advising on the side. I retired from any employment at HSLDA when I became the president of Alliance Defending Freedom in late 2016, and so which is the biggest legal organization, Christian legal organization in the world.
Yeah.
And I retired from that a couple of years ago. And as general counsel of National Religious Broadcasters, most of what I do is file amicus briefs, usually in the Supreme Court, sometimes in lower courts. I did one for the Union Gospel Mission of Yakima, Washington, that won a decision a few days ago that they had the right to only employ Christians in their Christian ministry. So,
Yeah.
guess what?
Go.
And so I also litigate directly a few cases. You may have heard of the case where the IRS has agreed to a judgment that the Johnson Amendment, which is a nonprofit component of the nonprofit law, cannot be applied to church worship services, and pastors are free to say what they want to say about hand. I'm the lead litigator in that case, and
Oh
so
my goodness, that's incredible.
so I'm actively working on those things, but I keep my hand in the homeschooling movement, and I'm not employed. I don't have any board role at ADF, but I still coach out a little bit there in time and talk to them. I was the CEO for 6 years, and so I'm still very, very fond of what's going on there, and write amicus briefs for them and other organizations like First Liberty is a good organization, Pacific Justice is a good organization, Liberty Council is a good organization, and others. So the need for Christian fighters in not just the legal sphere, but in all spheres of life is very, very needful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I feel like, constitutionally, we probably have a lot more rights than what we think. And sadly, the public school system probably made us believe we didn't have a voice and we don't have, the right to free speech and all of these things. And that's constantly trying to be suppressed or, um, just, canceled or whatever it is. Um, what would you say to people that really feel like, in these situations, maybe it is in the public school world, where a parent is trying to really advocate, or in the homeschool world, in their community or in their state, where they're getting significant pushback, or maybe futuristically we start to come against some pushback, which I feel like it's always right there. We're always at that point of losing certain rights. It feels like, at least in Colorado, it feels that way. Just a couple decisions away from things going sideways.
Yeah.
What would you say to, I mean, really Americans as a whole, but especially parents, of what our rights really are and what voices we really have?
Well, in general terms, the government does not have the right to decide what is appropriate to say or believe or to follow. You have the God given right to live your life according to what God tells you to do. Now, there are limitations to that. If God tells you to sacrifice your children on the altar to Molech, you don't have the right to do that. And in spiritual terms, the answer is the moral law of God that gives freedom doesn't let you violate the moral law of God about murder.
Mhm.
And so the moral law of God's always, the overarching principle here. But the the way you know your rights is you got to study and you got to associate with people who've studied. And I have a civics curriculum, I have a constitutional law curriculum, but being associated with your state homeschool organization, being associated with HSLDA, listening to podcasts like yours, getting yourself informed. And so there's an important combination of us standing shoulder to shoulder and individual activity. There are individual rights, individual duties, and we ultimately, you as a parent have to do what's right before God with your kids.
Mhm.
Now, in the process of that, it's always good when God's people stand together. In the Old Testament, it says one can drive out 1,000, but two can drive out 10,000. Well,
Yeah, that's right.
there's God's math involved in that.
Yeah.
And that is when we stand together, shoulder to shoulder, there is a lot of good that can be done. And so the reason that homeschooling was legally and politically successful as a tiny little splinter movement against very powerful forces, not the least of which is the teachers union in every state legislature in the country, is that it was God multiplying people standing together.
Mhm.
And so that's the formula that works. It was courageous individuals that stood up against, said, our family's going to do this. And so, and then lots of people had to come around them and defend them when it was attacked, when their rights were attacked. And so that kind of uh, um, body of Christ kind of joining together, along with the individual courage, blessed by the power of God and driven by the power of God, is that multiple, the three twine cord coming together and providing really great strength.
Yeah, that's amazing. The courage piece. I mean, he does not give us he gives us courage, right? Power of
Indeed.
sound mind. Um, oh my goodness, I love that. I love the idea of multiplication. I think God loves multiplication. We see it over and over again in scripture, like you said. And I think about loaves and fishes, and that's kind of a word that the Lord just keeps bringing over, just a theme he keeps bringing into my life of just, you've got loaves and fishes and let me multiply. I'm like, just bringing those, and we as people can be that, and be that voice in the public square, with these topics and with these issues. And I'm personally in Jefferson County. You've probably heard of us. um we're a hot news headline about every 6 months, I think.
Yeah.
And we just arrested um English teacher, 2 days ago, I think, um, for multiple accounts. I think I read 40 felony charges and, 10 cases of child exploitation. And it's boggling, um, who were, just, you jokingly say, "Oh, I'm gonna wait till I throw my kids out with the wolves," but it really, I mean, there's so many wolves out there. They really are there.
Well, I don't know if I've ever said this exactly this way before, but when you run a system that is systematically teaching people that there's no such thing as right and wrong, guess what happens? You attract people who believe that.
Mm,
And if you don't believe in right and wrong, molesting kids, well, it appeals to the corrupt, sinful, vile, wicked nature of somebody,
yeah.
and they're going to come, and they've been taught, and they're surrounded by people that celebrate. There's no right, there's no wrong, and guess what? They're acting on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. Well, this has been so informative. This has been such a blessing to get to speak with you and get to know you a little bit better. And I hope we can meet in person sometime. I don't know if you'll be at the NRB conference, but
Yes,
I'm always there.
I'll be there. Yes, I'll be there.
Yay. That's
See you.
exciting. Very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to drop kind of all the things that you are invested in the show notes so people can really push into those resources
Great.
and learn a lot more about that because I think those will be incredible to have. We have Colorado Home, it's called CHECK for abbreviation, but Homeschool, Colorado, oh my word, Christian Home Educators of Colorado. I always try and switch the C's. They have been incredible for at least from where I stand at fighting back
They're a great
against.
organization. I've spoken at that convention many, many times in the past.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
It's a
Uh,
very good.
yeah, yeah. No, they're incredible. I'll be at their big conference. Our kids are enrolled kind of as their umbrella school here locally, and so we really love supporting them and appreciate everything that they do there. And so I encourage anyone listening, if you're not in my state, to find those programs locally in your own state and to really just get more involved, like you said, just awareness and educating yourself to know what those issues are and why we need to stay bold and stand firm. Um, Today, raising our kids, we've got arrows and we've got to shoot them straight. And it sounds like you shot a whole lot of arrows pretty darn straight. So I applaud you for that, and that is a testimony of God's faithfulness and your faithfulness to him through your life.
Well, thank you, Hannah. God bless you, and may God bless the people of Colorado. You're living in very uh, dark waters. The
Yeah,
political forces there in Colorado are very, very difficult, and so, but stand strong and true. God's bigger than those guys.
that's right. That's right. All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate it.
Bye bye.